Okay. So the last little bit of nerves, we got the common fibular nerves, whose origin is one of two terminal branches of the sciatic nerve. The curvature diverges laterally to enter the lateral compartment of the leg, the lower extremity. Um, Terminal branches would be the deep femoral nerve and the superior of the peroneal nerve. Um, Motor supply is short heads of the biceps femoris, and then the sensory supply is the cutaneous intervention of the posterior lateral leg. And now we're going to talk about surface anatomy landmarks. The posterior superior iliac spine is the first one we're going to look at. In the posterior border of the ala, or ala, forgive my pronunciation, shorter than the anterior, also presents two projections separated by a notch. The posterior superior spine that serves for the attachment of the oblique portion of the posterior sacroiliac ligaments and the multifundus. The anterior inferior iliac spine that corresponds to the posterior extremity and the auricular surface. Below the posterior inferior spine is the deep notch and the greater sciatic notch. The posterior inferior iliac spine is the anatomic lemma that describes the bony spine and the projection of the posterior inferior surface of the iliac bone. Then we have the sacroiliac joint, and then here's where we really start looking at why the names of these landmarks, muscles, nerves are important, is because of the origin or the function that it will tell. So the sacroiliac joint will be the sacrum and the ilias. That's where they'll join. It's called the triangular bone at the bottom of the spine. That's your joint. That's how you would, then your two legs. And there is not a lot of motion at the joint, but it's very strong and stable in comparison to your shoulder, which is very movable in all of directions, but it's not very strong and stable, so you might be able to, like they say, break your shoulder a lot easier, or at least dislocate it, had the rotator cuff injuries more easily. Then we have the ischial tuberosity, which is the location of the bony swelling that enables it to bear the weight of the body in a seated position. It is potential site of attachment for several muscles and ligaments, such as the gluteus maximus and then the natal cleft. But anyway, we'll continue now with the gluteus maximus, which is firstly attached to the ischial tuberosity. It's an important muscle because it is a prime mover of the leg. So when you think of the thigh, you think of having to move the rest of your leg too. So you need a very strong muscle to do this. Also, this muscle is important because it propels the body forward, as when walking or running. It also helps externally rotate the leg, so rotate the leg outward externally. Another of its function is just as important, which is to keep the head of the femur from sliding forward. I guess that's important, right? Now we have the natal cleft, and this was one of my favorite ones. It's the groove between the buttocks that runs just below the sacrum on the perineum, which we call the butt crack. We see that a lot in very small jeans and people who don't wear clothing the size that is appropriate, and we tend to make fun of it, just like I just did. Now the gluteal fold is the gluteus sulcus, is known as that, or the fold of the buttock, or the horizontal gluteal crease, is the area of the body where humans and great apes describe as the horizontal crease formed by the anterior aspect of the buttocks and the posterior horizontal skin cease of the hip joint, overlying fat that covers top of the muscle, right? Then we have, before I move on, I have this piece of information that I thought was very important, and I'm going to read it here. Children with developmental dysplasia of the hips are born with uneven gluteal folds, and that can be diagnosed with a physical examination and a sonogram. Thought that was very cool.